Rage?
Rage.
Rage.
Try but it's hard to make it when me a look still stay down in a that's in the father tribulation. Be 1,000 blessings, give me stability and guidance.
Welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm here with Tom Roberish from Albertine.
Hello, hello.
And today we are going to talk about the Best Translated Book Awards for the most part. The winners have been announced. Well, technically they have not been announced yet, but we know what they are. And by the time this goes live, they will have been announced at the Folly in New York City and on the Millions website. So we're going to talk about those. We'll talk about like what's going on at BEA, which is a week from now. God, Jesus, I have so much to do before then. And just some general stuff. So I don't know. Do you want to preface something about the Best Translated Book Award since you were involved in kind of dealing with the whole fiction jury the whole way through?
I don't really know what to say in terms of preface. I mean, everyone knows what was on the short list. I haven't seen a whole lot of, I was looking earlier to see if anyone was making final guesses, Michael Ortfers of the world, but I hadn't seen much.
Okay.
Have you?
No, anytime that there was an article about it, it was always Frontain Lispector.
Interesting. As we'll soon find out, that is not the case. No, it's been an interesting process, I will say. Being sort of behind the scenes, watching the sausage get made and seeing how you go from, I don't know how many eligible books.
Almost 500.
500, let's say 350 maybe actually get submitted and read a little bit by the judges, and then you go, down to 25 and 10, and yeah, it was interesting watching the way people talk about things and the way people argue on behalf of things, and the way that when you get down to 6, it's really hard because you look at the list and you think, God, any of these could win, and you would say, yes, absolutely deserves to win, and I would feel great about it. And yet you have to, get rid of 3.
Right.
To even, have a real conversation about, who should actually win. So it's tough. If in case anyone was in doubt, it is very tough to choose a winner like this.
They had I used 9 books in my class this year that they sort of replicate this process and have to pick one of the 9 to be the winner of their award. And on the last day of class, they have to decide what criteria they'll use, based on the quality of the translation, or if the translation was especially difficult, the cultural relevance of the book. Is it a book that's going to be right 100 years from now? Is it something that would appeal to a wide audience, and is that important or not? All those different things that you might go through. And this year, they couldn't finish. We got kicked out of our room, and they couldn't come to a conclusion before we had to leave. So a few of them actually stayed in my office and argued about it, and ended up with Tram 83 and The Story of My Teeth winning.
Interesting. Wait.
So, yeah, they ended up with it under one set of conditions where they used this kind of numerical ranking of criteria. Tram 83 won, but then they immediately overthrew that and decided they wanted Story of My Teeth to win in part because it was the involvement of the translator, and her creation of that was politically important to them as translation students.
Wow. How do you feel about that? I mean, I guess they decided on these criteria then.
Yeah, I made them. Initially they weren't going to talk about any criteria. They're just going to yell at each other for a while and just vote randomly and haphazardly. So at least they came down to a discussion. And half the people were against Story of My Teeth because of the translator's over visibility, and the other half were for it because of her being a part of the process, and that the book evolved from the original to the original Spanish version and through all its iterations, that they thought that creative process was interesting. But that one was really divisive, to be honest. Tram 83 was also divisive, but more people were on board with that for various reasons. But some saw it as we're just choosing the book because it's from first book from the Congo, and less because we really like this book. Yeah,
I have a lot of very confused ideas in my own head about all of those criteria. I will say, to sort of blanket respond to both of those books having won, that as a reader, I guess I've always. I mean, look, I never went to grad school. I don't really speak to any one school of literary criticism in an academic sense. But I think what I most, having touched on these a little bit, just the course of my adult life, I think it would probably be what is called linguistic criticism, which is you only judge the results on the page. And I always sort of subscribe to belief that I don't care where the writer's from. I don't care what the writer's love life is and all of that sort of stuff. Like, I'll never forget the David Foster Wallace review of the Borges biography in, 2007 or so, that he viewed as putting Borges on the couch and trying to psychoanalyze Borges through his short stories. And I totally disagree with that sort of thing. I don't want to know I don't care what the writer's, marriage was like at the time when he was writing a book. To me, that's unimportant. You should only read what's in the text, and the only context should be provided by what's in the text itself, which is a way of saying, I don't care if the translator was involved in the process. I mean, I think it's interesting from a publishing point of view, but as a reader, I don't care for Story of My Teeth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that they really like that added the sixth part, the whatever it was called, the chronologic.
Really?
Yeah.
That was like so bells and whistly.
I feel like Caroline's listening to this and punching things.
Caroline, look, we love Caroline. Caroline, more than anything, appreciates that we have our own opinions.
This is true. I wouldn't. For which other books do we use? We use Lies First Person, I by Wolfgang Hilbig, Oblivion by Sergei Lebdev, or however you say his name. What are the other ones? God, I forget now, because this just happened, but like there's 9 books. Mario Bay teen book, The Large Glass, which I really like too. I mean, they're all like good books. I didn't know which one would win. I figured they'd pick Tram 83 because it seemed like the one that was like most engaging to them as a whole. Like the class, no one had any bad feelings towards it, whereas some of them really disliked other books. So that was the one I thought was going to win, mostly because they found it entertaining and that they liked the reading that Fiston gave. I showed them like a YouTube of him doing his presentation. Presentation.
That's a euphemism.
But you know what you're saying about the biography, and that actually ties in when we get to the BEA stuff. One of the events I have to do is about the biography of Kapuscinski, and it is all of that you dislike. It is that for 444 pages, or at least the first 66, and I don't think it's going to change.
No, when you lay out 66 pages of that, you're sticking to it.
Yeah, you're not moving back. But it's very much into like, here's what Kapuscinski said in Travels with Herodotus, at the end of his life about his hometown, and here's what it was like according to his sister, and why was he telling these sorts of lies about this place? And it's like down to that level of like, did he really only read 2 books in high school, or did he read more than 2 books in high school?
Oh, Jesus.
Not kidding you. And it's like, part of it, the what could be interesting if this guy can pull the strings right, is that it's about like the kind of invention of the Kapuscinski character in his books, like in The Soccer War and in Shazal and whatchamacallit, Emperor and Imperium especially. But it hasn't gotten to hit anything yet for me that's like, oh, okay, I get that's interesting. It's more like nitpicking specific details. And that's, I agree with you, like, that's not as interesting as, like, the greater picture. But really, I'm at the point where he just went to college. So.
You got a long way to go.
I sort of had a hard time.
It's a long, productive life.
It is a very long biography, too. No offense to the guy who wrote it. Whatever. Anyways, I think this is what...
Before we leave this Story of My Teeth thing, I just want to say, it's a very good book. Mm-hmm. I just think it stands on its own as a very good book. I don't think it needs the extra burnishment of the translator was involved, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And that was really, to be fair to the class, that was just one component when they discussed each one of the books. Like, things that they would put forth as, like, why this book deserved extra credit or deserved to like stand out. Because there wasn't any book that there's one book that everyone unanimously disliked, and that was Beauty is a Wound. But there's someone who's like, but the argument can be made that like to see like another culture, like it's culturally one of the most interesting because this is a place we don't know about. It's whatever. But that lasted for like 40 seconds, and they're like, no, we hate this book.
But it still has to be a good book.
Right.
The cultural relevancy doesn't trump everything. And
they really liked the Bayatine book, or certain people did, because of the language in it, and because David Shook was pretty wowing in talking to the class too. And there's a secret.
The class seems very impressionable. I'm just gonna say
there's a secret, but I can't tell you the part of it. But there's a secret about the third autobiography in Bayatine's The Large Glass that I think David is writing an article about. And when the article comes out, you'll understand why this was pretty cool. But I shouldn't really say what it is since it's his thing to unveil about the book.
That was incredibly cryptic, and no one.
I know. I can tell you separately, but I probably shouldn't say it on here.
Okay.
Just in case, because I know he's working on something about it. But that one was never going to win because it was like middle. It's kind of difficult, kind of crazy. But yeah, there's no book they hated, so they put forth different reasons. And the translator, Christina McSweeney's involvement in that, and like the way that it was like a more collaborative book between her and the workers at the factory, and then the Spanish version was then edited into English, and the English version is different, and that sort of evolving of the text through like different people's collaboration, I think had some appeal, like, and that they liked the book, and then that was just like another part to it. But it's always it's a really fun exercise that makes teaching easier a lot of ways, because you have like a goal and a thing to focus on, and then any week I can bring in any book and be like, well, here's why this might be superior, or like what about this angle to it. So that's fine, but that's where they ended. I also think we are totally bearing the lead and not telling anyone who won this thing. Although they should know by now. They should know by now.
I just looked up so when was this? January? I guess this is when the actual thinking about the judging process started. And I laid out the process for all the judges. And after I did all of that, I said, one last thing. Criteria. This award was created with the intention of awarding the best book and translation. A brilliant translation of a boring, pedantic book shouldn't win, just as a pedestrian translation of an otherwise fascinating, intriguing, etc. book shouldn't win. We want to award the writer and the translator. That was it. Yep. That's what I laid out as criteria, and we came up with a winner based on that. And I feel like that's pretty succinctly what this is supposed to be, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's supposed to be. And the students use that too, as like the book and the translation. And then they got into like whether this book had, like, how it would appeal to an audience.
Right.
Was third. And then it was more like, how is this culturally interesting? Or is this a book that like it'll be cool for like 20 days and then no one's ever going to read it again? But so
that's like a microcosm of what publishing as a whole is like.
Yeah, pretty much. So we should say, let's do the poetry one first to get this out of the way. Since you
sorry, poetry people.
Not in that sense, but is Angelica Freitas's Rilke Shake, which was translated from the Portuguese by Hilary Kaplan one, and this was published by Phoneme, who also did the Bayatine and is run by David Shook, who we just were talking about, making it the second Phoneme book in a row to win for poetry. So they've pulled the new directions.
I was just going to say,
and doubled
impressive.
Up. That's hardcore, which is great for them. And this is the book that when we were going through the shortlist was the one I said I thought that I liked because it seemed to have funny, like it's sort of irreverent, and according to this description, I haven't read it, it really vacillates between being like irreverent and playful and to being much more like emotionally powerful and charged. So that's more my vein of poetry, less of like the uber serious, this is a poem sort of thing, and more playful. So I'm glad that one won. I think that's cool. There's also a poem about Gertrude Stein farting in a bathtub, which I'm pretty sure I said last time too.
You are quite fond of the Gertrude Stein farting in the bathtub.
It's quite literally the first poem I read from that, and maybe the only poem I read from that book. So I don't know what else is in there. So I'll just stick with that one. And then for fiction, you want to say fiction?
Yes, the winner is Yuri Herrera's Signs Preceding the End of the World, translated from the Spanish. The book is from Mexico, translated from the Spanish by Lisa Dillman. and published by And Other Stories. So congratulations.
So
do you want me to read Jason's?
Yeah.
Jason was one of the judges, Jason Grunbaum, who is a translator himself. He said, translator Lisa Dillman has crafted a dazzling voice in English for Yuri Herrera's Signs Preceding the End of the World, a transformative tale of a young woman's trip on foot from Mexico to the U.S. to deliver a package and find a brother. This novel of real pathos and unexpected displacement in self, place, and language achieves a near-perfect artistic convergence of translator and author while giving readers an urgent account from today's wall-building world.
Sums it up quite nicely.
Very nicely, yes. I agree.
And it is. This one is, like, politically timely.
It really is. It really is. So you read this a while ago. I just read it last week because I knew it had won, and I was like, oh, God, I should probably read this. Just hadn't gotten around to it. It is a very striking voice, so much so that I keep thinking Yuri is a woman. Because the main character is a woman. Like, he really nails her voice, and it's consistent. And I think some or a lot of that credit for the version I'm reading in English has to go to the translator and keeping that consistent even in the translation. I mean, it really is striking the way it comes across. It's hard to talk about this book without giving too much away. Jason's little summary there of, her traveling from somewhere in Mexico to somewhere in the U.S. To track down her brother, basically, and running errands along the way is pretty accurate. To give away any more detail would be to spoil the fun of the sort of propulsive sort of plot that unfolds page by page. But it is a really fascinating read, and the asides, the observations the narrator makes about life around her is just very cutting and accurate, and they really stick with you as you're reading, and all of them, which I really love about this sort of like short, it's only 100 pages, so every word has to count, right? Every little aside sort of adds more to the character and adds more to the plot. They don't seem like asides, like in the David Foster Wallace expansive footnote that has nothing to do with anything sort of way. Not that I don't love those, but this is a very different kind of writing, and it is very economical, and it makes very good use of every word on the page. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does have like a lot to do with language and translation and that kind of crossings, essentially, in both of those forms, which makes it make sense to win the award too.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is kind of like a translator's, like we always say, like a writer's writer or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is like a translator's book. Yeah. It's very, very much, if you are into this world at all, reading voices from around the world, this is a very good example of what is possible and why translation in general is so important.
And he seems like a really cool guy. He lives in New Orleans, actually.
Right. I remember I was trying to look him up to like figure out if he might be there on Wednesday for the party, and then I discovered that he was in New Orleans, so that seems unlikely.
But the bigger problem, he would have been there, but the bigger problem was that he was up in New York for the Penworld Voices Festival, and had to cancel his classes, and then came back to finish up the semester in New Orleans. So if everything was like 1 week earlier, he would have been there. And Lisa couldn't come either, but I've known for years, because she worked on a book at Delkey that had has a huge long backstory to it that shouldn't be recorded. Which is Oopaloop by Juan Villoro, which on her bio references that it was longlisted for the Best Translated Book Award. So I'm glad she won, because she actually takes that seriously and puts it into her bio. But she's really cool, and she lives in Atlanta and teaches at Emory, and is translated Andres Barba, a lot of books of his, along with some other people, but also did the next Yuri Herrera book called The Transmigration of Bodies, which comes out in July. So this is like perfect timing for Herrera and for her.
Is that also coming out from And Other Stories?
Yep.
So, what am I thinking of, that title? Oh, the Philip K. Dick book.
Oh, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer?
Archer? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great book, too.
That is a great book.
I haven't read this new Herrera book, but it's sitting on my shelf.
Oh, you have a copy already?
Yep.
Yeah, this is the problem with working in a French bookstore. No one sends me anything.
That's not French?
That's not French. Although I did, total random aside here, I did get a galley of the new George Saunders.
I remember I saw that online that you had mentioned that because it comes out in January. 7 months ahead of time. I don't even know what month it is. May.
9 months.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of months.
Although I was talking to a friend about this, who's not even in publishing, and leave it to somebody who's not in publishing to put the pieces together. We have an election in the fall.
Yep.
Might as well get those galleys out now, because for 3 months in the fall, no one's going to be paying attention to this at all.
Yeah, and everything's going to burn right after that in November.
It's funny. So the Albertine is planning the festival for next year, which is, early November. And they had it scheduled, and as far as I know, they still do, for, right before the election. Ending on the Sunday right before the election.
Wow. And
I was like, no, you have to change that. You have to immediately change that. And they're like, why? Is it going to be a big deal? It's like, are you people? I was yelling. I was like, no, of course Donald Trump, yes, it's a big deal. It's like, are you sure? I was like, yes, I'm sure. It's going to be, no one publishes anything of any literary sort of import around a presidential election. It's just, you cede all attention to the election, and that's all there is to it.
Which is, I don't know. I'm not huge into politics, except that I don't like any of that. At all.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah, my politics could best be described as, wanting something totally different.
Right, exactly. And now that that's not going to happen at all, and it's clear that's not a choice anymore, I'm back to my blasé, don't really want to deal with this anymore attitude.
Yeah.
Alas. Yeah, we actually, Kaya really likes George Saunders, but Jeffrey Zuckerman sent us that galley as well, because the Volodine book is Bardo or Not Bardo, and is connected thematically to that Saunders novel in terms of spending time in the Bardo, so on and so forth. So we're going to send him a copy of it. I don't know what the books, they're totally different, obviously, but the fact that it's about the Bardo overall seems like maybe, I could see Saunders actually liking that Volodine book because it's wacky and funny.
He wouldn't need a primer on all of.
Oh no, this one's totally different than the one that you read.
Okay,
it's just 7 vignettes that sort of overlap in some characters, but not all, that are all about people in the afterlife and people fucking up the afterlife.
Sounds very much like a George Saunders thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's one.
Look, if George Saunders doesn't want to blurb it, just make one up.
Yeah. That's what we should do. The book's already out, so we can't. Yeah, but we should. Yeah, just put it on there.
Printing, just put it on the website. Who's it
on Amazon? No one's gonna check. It's not like I've never invented a blurb before.
We are not endorsing this practice, for the record.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with it.
We're not endorsing it. But.
If it happens. If I just happen to type something and it shows up on a website, it's not really my fault. Anyway, I don't know what else to say about the Best Translated Book Award, although it was a good year, the good long list, good short list. It's pretty solid.
Yes, and congratulations are in order, of course.
Yeah, congratulations to the
book. To everyone, poetry included. I feel like we give them the short end of the stick so often, but
I know, but I really I've read the winners every year, and I really like the books. I just generally don't read all of the short list or anything like that, and I don't have as much familiarity going in.
Right,
is a problem. Any predictions on who would be a front runner for next year?
Oh my god!
What should I call it? Knausgaard, book volume 5. He didn't even make it this time, which is sort of surprising.
No. I can't even tell you what I've read that's come out.
I'm just flipping through the database right now. Oh, you know what it is? Probably Sudden Death by Alvaro Enrique. That's got to be a front runner. Everyone I know that's read that loves that book.
The Vegetarian?
Oh, The Vegetarian, yeah.
Wow, I really
trying to see what are we publishing during this year that's viable. Oh, Greater Music by Bay Soie. That might be better than The Vegetarian. I think it's better. Yeah, that's right. Forgot about that too.
I haven't read yet. Can't think of what else. I'd have to go look at my books, but
yeah, I'm just
probably from the French, so that's not really.
99% of these I have not seen and or they have not come out yet. So, but well, yeah, as it goes, I'm sure we'll figure have some opinions at least, things that shouldn't make it. But yeah, congratulations to everyone. I guess you want to talk too about like what's going on at Book Expo next week.
Yeah, I will not be there since I no longer work in publishing.
Yeah, I will be but not so much for the fair itself, which I find less useful every year.
Well, in theory, I could go as a bookseller, but we're such a niche store that, we're not even members of ABA. Why would we be?
Oh, really? Yeah, I don't know why you would. And like, I don't think you're going to find anything there that you're not aware of already.
Yeah, no, it really makes no sense. And BEA is not the sort of workshopping, how to run a bookstore sort of place the way Winter Institute is at all.
Yeah, and I don't know that we need everything to be like that, but it's not that, and it's also not fun anymore. Like, it used to be so much fun. Like,
it's not fun at all. You're absolutely right.
It used to be enjoyable and like wild. Yeah. And the people would just like, I feel like part of the social benefit or the actual business benefit to BEA for years was like a community building sort of like, we're in this together, let's enjoy ourselves for a week, have parties, and, exchange information about books that we like, and just feel good as people that have to be in this business together. And the more it becomes like standardized is like, what is the cost valuation benefit of attending this Book Expo America, the less interesting it is.
Right. I mean, the problem is it's gotten too big and it's too expensive to put on. So they have more and more corporate sponsors, which drown out any sort of, on the sales floor sort of conversation that is actually useful to a real bookseller and to a real, like a publicist or author or anybody like that. Most of what happens at BEA is for like the top level and for like chain bookstores, right? It's not like us.
Yeah, I think so. But there's also like it's like a slippery slope, and it was like became a vicious cycle in which because the publishers didn't want to go anymore because they didn't feel like they were selling books there or getting any value out of it. Fewer of them were taking out tables, so the price on the tables had to go up to make up for the people who weren't going to it.
Right.
And then it got filled in with a lot of these like shitty ass digital initiative things. Like I've gotten a bunch of them about like, we can sell your ebook better than anyone else. Come visit table BX54 or whatever. And like, no, don't care. And all the other crap that they sell there. And now that, and I'm gonna do a little complaining because now that Steve Rosato's not there, I feel a little bit more okay with like taking a couple shots at BA. And one thing that I think is fucked up is that I've had a press pass for as long as I can remember. Like for 10 or 12 years, every year I just get this email saying like I sign up as like as press from Delkey times when we ran Context magazine for bookstores. From that point onwards, I was always like a member of the press, and this year they rejected me, and I guess they rejected a bunch of people. So like they're also not letting in people that are like tangentially or like on the outskirts of like the press world, but like talk about books. They're not letting them get into the show without having to pay whatever it is, $300 to get in. It's maybe not that much, but it's probably a lot. So it's I don't know. It just seems like I don't quite get it anymore. And I don't think that they do either. And I don't know that they know how to make it relevant again. I had a conversation actually with Harold Augenbraum from the National Book Foundation, or formerly of the National Book Foundation. And we were talking about Book Expo as like, and the book con aspect of it. And that wouldn't it make more sense if Book Expo had like an anchor event, like the National Book Awards announcement is like it happens during BEA, the way that the Nobel Prize in Literature happens during Frankfurt. Like that there's some like cause for celebration or reason for this to exist. This is getting really bleak. I'm going to be doing a shitload of events at BEA, and I'm basically like digging myself a deep hole here.
Yeah. I don't know. I have not felt that BEA has been worthwhile. It's just so poorly. I don't know. How do you make it how do you have a landmark event to place it around,
I don't know. I think I could go on to something else. Like move it from May, move it to October. That would be horrible. Move it to like whenever. Do something. I don't know. Or have it just be more of the enjoyable aspects of it. which I don't know how you'd create either. But the thing that I do like, so the part that I am doing that I think is actually okay, is that every year there's the different global market forum, as they call it, with a different country or whatever that's being highlighted. It's been, I don't know who it was. It's been China was last year, I believe. Arabic World one year. One year it was just translation. And this year it's Poland. So I'm doing a few of their events. And I think that some of these are really interesting and some of them are very good, like public events, because they do a bunch that are at BA itself. And those ones are fine usually, but, they're more insider baseball. Like we're doing one called Men One with Jill from Archipelago called Why Poland? Why Now? Strategies for Promotion of Polish Literature in the U.S. And then, but the off-site ones, Poland's bringing in a bunch of authors. I think 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I'm trying
5?
to count myself.
I guess 5. And they're doing stuff on the Tuesday, May 10th, right through that weekend, out in the city, both at bookstores and at various venues. Like the first one is at the Chopin Theater, which I'm making special remarks at, and that's going to have their 5 Polish authors. Which this is funny. Like I don't know how to pronounce most of these names, so this is going to be great.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
But they're having their five Polish authors will be reading there, like Krystyna Dabrowski, Artur Damyslawski, Dorota Meslowski, Zygmunt Mileszewski, and Magdalena Tully. Will each be reading, so that'll be kind of fun. And then the other one that I'm doing is the Art of Narrative Nonfiction, which is interviewing having a conversation with Artur Damyslawski about the Kapuscinski biography and Sebastian Junger about his new book called Tribe, that is basically about the idea that that modern world, or it's basically about how tribes are good. Being around community is better, and that we've basically become alienated in our culture from each other. And it's only in times of strife or stress or bad things that we become more helpful to each other.
Right. I do like that in the description there, it actually talks about what it says here. Damyslawski, whose expose of Poland's most feted journalist, Ryszard Kapuscinski, landed him in hot water with Kapuscinski's devoted fans.
Yeah. So they're honest about it.
Yeah,
it's going to be a little interesting. I mean, it's a short event. It's like an hour long, so it's not going to be a huge, super deep conversation. But the Sebastian Junger, people might know he wrote The Perfect Storm, which is probably his most famous book. But and Restrepo was the movie that came out based on his book War about being in Afghanistan. But there's a book of his called, is it Murder in Belmont or Death in Belmont? One of the two. But it's about the Boston Strangler. And how the guy who confessed to all the Boston Strangler murders actually worked on Sebastian Junger's house.
Death in Belmont.
That book is pretty cool. I like that quite a bit. It's totally different than these other ones, but it's more like a true crime thing, and it's interesting. But I like that. But in terms of the other events, I don't know. Do you see any ones that are on here that jump out at you?
These Polish ones?
Yeah.
I was looking at this Once Upon a Crime, which...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They can't help themselves.
But it's Sarah Paretsky, best known for the V.I. Warshawski books.
Oh, yeah.
So that seems interesting. With Alison Flowers? I don't know who that is.
I don't either. The guy, Zygmunt Mileszewski, I think his book is coming out from Amazon, actually, this fall.
Rage.
Yeah, just Rage. Alison Flowers is a writer, multimedia journalist, and a storyteller.
I see there's even a children's event in here that's taking place at 57th Street, which is good. They don't always include that kind of thing. Yeah,
and there's one that's taking place at the library in Morton Grove, in fact, which is right in Chicago. That's kind of interesting.
Wait, where is the book expo?
It's at McCormick Place, which is where it always is. It's right by Soldier Field.
Okay, because even 57th Street is not that close.
No. 57th Street is not close. I mean, it's a. The problem with 57th Street is that you can't get there by the metro. Right.
I mean, there's even one unabridged, which, again, not really close to where BEA is either, but at least the subway goes up there.
Oh, yeah. That's all.
Unabridged is a great store. Just random aside, I loved Unabridged.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a huge fan.
They're doing a display of our books, actually.
They do things their own way, and they make it work, and I like them.
Yeah, I like them a lot. I'm in a party there too. There is also, if you're listening to this and it hasn't taken place yet, which it shouldn't have, on May 11th, from 5 till 6:30 at 57th Street, there'll be a reception for the Best Translated Book Awards. I'm going to buy some wine and some food, some snack things, and I think Kevin and a couple other judges are going to talk about the award and their process, and mostly just going to hang out.
I think Amanda will both be in town. Maybe they'll be there.
I feel like that's true.
I don't know who else.
I don't think that that Patrick Smith's not coming, but he was going to at one point in time. He's going to be there, but I don't know if anyone else is of the judges. Jason might. He lives in Chicago.
Oh, right. Okay. So there you go. You might get 4 judges. That's not bad.
You can go lobby him for your favorite for next year.
For next year. All right. Before we sign off, because there's part 2 of this podcast is you talking to some other folks, not me, but you already recorded, about a soccer book because, I don't care. So this is our last podcast for some time because you're going off to BA and then you're going to Marfa.
Yep.
For the Lannan residency.
Yep.
Through middle of June?
Yeah, June 22nd is when I come back.
Most of June. I will actually be out of town for half of June as well. And this brings me to our reading. So we have agreed to each read one version of Dirty Dust. I'm reading the one called Dirty Dust. You're reading the other one.
Graveyard Clay? Yep, Graveyard Clay.
I'm happy to switch with you.
No, it's fine. It doesn't matter. I'd probably look back and forth too.
Bought the other one.
Yeah. I might look back and forth between them as well.
Okay. I'm also intending to read the new Javier Marias, which I got and haven't had time to read yet, and I'm looking forward to plowing through that on the beach. And then I wanted to ask you, I need to fill in the gaps in my Thomas Pynchon reading.
Yeah.
And so the 2 I haven't read, or 3 I haven't read, are Vineland,
which I don't like,
Against the Day, and Mason Dixon.
So Mason Dixon is one I wanted to go back and reread, and Against the Day, I read like 70% of it before coming here. And when it was during when everything was ending with Delkey and was moving here, so I put it aside and never went back to it. But I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Mason Dixon when I read it when it first came out. I would recommend those 2. I don't like Vineland. I know other people do. I just don't. I think it's not my favorite at all. I just find it less. There's less there. So it's thin. It's just kind of set piece jokes. It's not quite as interesting. Against the Day is the one that I'd recommend.
Okay. Fair enough. It was either that or go back and reread V because
that's awesome. I've read that book so many times.
Oh, it's so good. So fucking good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your plans are. You're going to read something that isn't for work, I hope.
Well, yes and no. I'm gonna work on a thing that I want to write, but then which I have some books I might be reading to go alongside with that. But I'm also judging one of the Korean literature award again, one of the judges. So I'm going to read some of those books, poetry and prose, while I'm down there. So it's going to be a mix of things. But hopefully I have to find something that I can at least read that's just fun, just that I want to.
Yes.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Right. And don't take that car to Mexico.
I will not. I'm not going to Mexico.
So when you told me that, I was thinking about it. I've been to Marfa. Mexico is pretty fucking far from Marfa.
Is it?
It's not down the street.
Oh, okay. I never looked, but I assumed it was an hour away or something like that.
Everything in Texas is 3 hours away from everything else in Texas.
See, I suspect that something happened.
You're probably right. I remember renting a car in, where was it, El Paso? That makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. If I was going to Marfa. But it also could have been San Diego, both on the border, where they definitely asked me, are you intending to go to Mexico? And I said, no. And I was just well, why? And they're because the insurance for this rental triples if you take it into Mexico.
That might actually be what the real reason behind this is, because it's like a rental car.
Right. And they said, "Are you sure you're not going to change your mind?" I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because we do have GPS on the cars and we'll know if you went." I was like, "Oh, okay. That's a little creepy, but I guess it is their right. They do own the car."
Yeah.
So
I don't want to go to Mexico. I'm good. I actually don't feel like going anywhere. I feel like getting there and just staying there for like a month.
I honestly, I know where the Lannon, like I know where the Judd, where all that is in relation to town, which is not that far. But is that where the residency is as well?
I don't know.
Like, are you on the Judd Foundation's property? I
do not know. I didn't have like an address or anything for me yet.
Because if so, like, it's maybe you'll have a bike, but like getting to town where like the 3 bars and 3 restaurants is, you could walk, but it's not like down the street. Whereas if you're staying in the center of town, you don't ever need to get in a car.
I see. Yeah.
Really depends on where it is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll love some stories.
Yes.
I made the other thing that I will probably do there is one of our translators, Will Vanderheiden, finished translating Invented Part by Rodrigo Frazan while he was there at Marfa, and I might bring that and start working through it because it's like a 600-page Spanish book that's like crazy and like David Foster Wallace-y overstuffed. So I might read that there, which would be kind of a nice timing. Like he worked on it there, I could work on it there. That'd be kind of fun.
It's an interesting place. It's very it's a weird place, that's for sure. It's like if Brooklyn got uprooted and transplanted to the middle of Texas.
Oh boy.
No, it is like the art world and like the Judd thing. Like it owns the city. Like It's very artsy there. So
that's cool. I heard that there's like Marfa lights, which people always thought were UFOs.
Yeah, there's like a viewing stage somewhere if you go like southeast of town. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right time of year. I feel like it's a weather phenomenon, so I don't know. It wasn't. Then again, I was there in March and it snowed. So
wow, really?
Yeah, it was bizarre. Very bizarre.
Man, I'm expecting it to be super, super hot.
It'll be hot when you're there.
Okay.
It's like it's high altitude, so it's it gets chilly at night.
Okay. I'm excited. I think it'll be fun.
It is. Yeah, it is beautiful. It's a good time. And be on the lookout for celebrities because they fly in for the weekend.
Really?
Yeah, it's that kind of place.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. 61 there right now. That's nicer than it is here.
It's even nicer than it is here.
Oh, and then on tomorrow, 61 there right now, and then the rest of the week it's 89.
Yeah, same. There you go.
That seems all right. Oh, good deal. Well, I should probably go, but I will talk to you soon, and we'll be back. I mean, theoretically, we could record one of these in the middle, but if not, we will be back in late next month.
Yes. But yeah, I will see you Wednesday in New York.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye. Welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and this is a special podcast where we have George Carroll here from the Pacific Northwest, where he's a books salesman and also our sales rep, and also works for Shelf Awareness doing a lot of their international fiction features. And we have Juan Villoro here, who is the author of the new book God is Round that came out from Restless Books in the beginning of middle of April. So hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Very happy to be in New York.
Yeah, so you're in New York for the Penn World Voices Festival, right?
Exactly.
How has that been going so far?
Well, it has been very, very interesting. I have attended a lot of venues with different authors. This time around, there are many Mexican authors because we are the special guest of the festival, which is, I think, only it's accurate because we have this tension with the Donald Trump campaign and so on. So we're raising also some tough and hot issues about the border, migrants, and so on.
So have you liked the programming so far?
Yes, it has been very, very interesting and stimulating and inspiring because I've had the chance to hear writers from many countries and also to be here with my fellow colleagues. Some of them live in New York, so I don't see them that often. There are other ones who live in the border. So it's also interesting to see what your colleagues from Mexico are doing right now.
Yeah, I actually have a question about that. Well, George and I were talking beforehand about how there's a number of like superstar Mexican authors at this moment, and it seems to be a good moment for Mexican literature. There's Valeria Luiselli, Alvaro Enrique, yourself, Yuri Herrera. I know Jorge Volpe's there as well, who we published years ago. And I was thinking about that too, that like the crack generation came about and helped put some aspects of Mexican literature back on the world map in translation and worked to like promote the idea that you didn't have to write just about Mexico, that you could write about anything, anywhere, and didn't need to be pigeonholed. And now it seems, I guess it's been almost 20 years since the Crack Manifesto came out. Possibly you're right, I think it is. But that there's another group of you that are taking the stage and taking the world stage. How do you see yourself and your writing fit into that?
Well, there's a wealth of authors in Mexico from different generations and from different parts of the country. And I think that our literary scene and our cultural scene in general is pretty active. I always remember one scene of the film The Third Man, which is starred by Orson Welles, and the screenplay is by Graham Greene. In this scene, Orson Welles tells another character this, what was the legacy of all the tranquility and all the economical success of Switzerland. And he said, the cuckoo watch. That's what they achieved. And instead, all the troubles and wars and intrigues and corruption of Italy gave us the Renaissance. Sometimes art emerges from a convulsed and very difficult society. And we are living violent and terrible times in Mexico with a very large impunity quota. And I think that the task for the writers is to react in a creative way. So if Orson Welles was right in that film, we have to be Renaissance artists.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you have a question, George? Or?
Oh, I was just going to ask. In your book, you mentioned that that it's very difficult for someone to write fiction about soccer, and yet. Yes. The book is non-fiction. How difficult is it to write non-fiction about soccer, considering that it's really hard to capture that feeling, that moment on the pitch, and actually turn it into literature?
Well, you know, soccer in itself is already fiction because each game is like a short story or a novel. There are too many things involved in a game. Ancient rivalries, search for revenge, superstitions, all the passions of the different teams and their fans. So this narrative is so coded that it's difficult to imagine something really different about the game. So if you're a creative writer and you want to write something different about the world, as soccer, it's a little bit limited because it's too coded. It's in itself a novel. It's in itself a narrative. So I think it's much more interesting when you tell for a second time all the things that the people already know. So I think that's why there's better nonfiction than fiction, which is, by the way, difficult because it's not easy to attain the attention of readers who already know who won the World Cup or they know the outcome of a certain game. But the interesting thing is to discover that that very game that was playing in the public eye had a hidden history, that there was like a private story to that game, that the fans had some illusions or hopes that were essential to what happened in the field. And even for the players, the game was not only playing in the grass, but it was also playing in their minds. Sometimes the nerves, the superstitions, and the fears are an instrumental influence for what happens in the field. So that's very interesting to try to discover this secret or hidden angles in the public story of soccer.
When we don't have access in the U.S. to Javier Marias' writings on soccer. Do you? Have you been able to read?
Well, yes, I'm a very good friend of Javier Maria, and he's a great writer, and he's devoted to soccer in a fantastic way. His only problem is that he's a supporter of Real Madrid.
No good. No.
I am a supporter of Barcelona, well, but I accept that because, he wrote a wonderful piece praising Barcelona because he said, what would be of all us, the Real Madrid people, without our chosen enemy? So you need this kind of enemy in soccer to achieve what you want to achieve. I mean, the success is sweeter if you defeat your arch rival.
Isn't that in the Soccer and Sun and Shadow? In that book, I think he talks about the idea that there has to be an enemy for any league to really function. Like you need Manchester United to hate, so the leagues function better that way, which is sort of interesting. The Spanish soccer league right now is crazy. Everyone's right there. Atletico Madrid I like Atletico Madrid right now because they get so much out of their players, and they're interesting as like a sort of team that should not be there. They should not be in second place by any means, but could actually win the league.
Well, that has to do with the things we were talking earlier. That has to do with the mental faculties of soccer and the psychology of the game. Cholo Simeone, the coach of Atlético de Madrid, is an extraordinary trainer. And one of the most important things he have said before confronting Real Madrid, Barcelona, or now Bayern Munich, is that he has to accept that those teams are better than his teams. He's not going to win them thinking that he has a better team. I mean, that's a wild idea. That's irrational. They have better players. But if you accept that you are weaker, maybe you can have an edge. You can have a chance. And that's, I think, the secret rule of heroism and epic in soccer. Sometimes a team wins being weaker than the winner. It's not that the team becomes suddenly a team of superheroes and that they are playing stronger than ever. No, every single fan in the pitch knows that the team that is winning is a weaker team. And that's the secret of Atlético de Madrid. And, well, that's a mental secret. That has not to do with athletics. And I think that's the mystery of soccer itself.
That's what I was going to ask you, too, what you think about, I don't know if you follow the EPL, but with Leicester on Sunday can win the league for the first time that they've ever won, and the only team outside of like the Man U, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea group, along with Blackburn, to actually win the Premier League. And that's a very exciting story. I just wondered if you do you follow that?
Yes, of course. Rob Hughes, who writes formidably for the International Herald Tribune and the International Edition of New York Times, he has written about Leicester being a team that resembles Atlético de Madrid, and is this kind of team that is always winning with one goal, and everybody saying, well, on the long run, they are not going to achieve success. They were lucky one time. But here you have Atletico de Madrid being lucky for 5 years in a row. So that's the way good trainers like Claudio Ranieri or Cholo Simeone, they shape a team that's a unity, and it's very, very difficult to beat those teams.
Yeah, it's really interesting. How did you come to write God Is Round? Were you writing a lot of different pieces on soccer and wanted to put it together into a book, or what was your thinking behind putting this together?
Well, my first take on soccer occurred in the World Cup in Italy in 1990. I had a chance to go there, and I was in charge of writing something not directly about the games, but about the surroundings of the games, the atmosphere. It was a time where the Pope was a great fan of soccer. John Paul II, he used to play as a goalkeeper. Madonna, the singer, had a crush on Roberto Baggio, so there was this angle of erotics and pop culture, and Madonna, being a transgressive singer, was forbidden to play in Rome at the time. The Communist Party was criticizing all the sponsors of the World Cup and the corruption involved. The Cicciolina, the porn actress, was deciding with which players she wanted to sleep and so on. So there was this whole atmosphere around the World Cup. And by the way, it was a really boring World Cup, that one, Italy 1990. So I wrote these pieces, and I thought this would be a first and a last for me. I didn't receive any payment for those pieces. I just got a ticket to go to Italy. At the time, I had a friend who was living there, and there was no internet, and I had no official accreditation at the World Cup organization. So I would go to the Italian Post and give them my text so that they would type it via telex and send it to Mexico. So my texts were not written in Spanish. They were written in a mixture of Spanish and Italian. And well, anyway, but I got lucky, and the pieces were well read, and suddenly I received other offers to write about soccer, and I decided to remain a fan of the fans. So the most interesting thing for me is not to write about the technical abilities of a team or the strategics of a certain trainer, but to write about the passion of the game, the superstitions, or all these almost theological aspects of the game. So that's how God Is Round came about. I started looking for stories that would be a good depiction of all the animosities and the passions and the hope people involved in the game.
That's really cool. Go ahead.
You're talking about superstitions and narrative. Can you just briefly say what it must be like for someone like the U.S. men's national team to play at the Azteca? I mean, what the Azteca to us is just this like huge monolith of fear. Can you talk about the Azteca? What it's like to be there?
Well, strangely enough, the American players, they seem to enjoy playing there because this is this huge stadium with a capacity for more than 100,000 fans, and you have all the people shouting. And Mexico is very well known for his public. I once said as a joke joke that if there would be a World Cup of publics, maybe Mexico would have made it to the final game, maybe against Scotland, because the Scots are so fantastic as cheerleaders. And both Mexico and Scotland have weak teams, but the people makes a stronger effort in the pitch than the players in the field. So we are not that interested in the outcome of the game. We are interested in having an extraordinary good time and being together. And this is like a tribal aspect of Mexican public. But there is one exception for us, the United States of America. When we play them, it's as if we were trying to recover Texas. I mean, everything seems to be at stake. The secret recipe for guacamole or whatever we have as a national treasure seems to be at stake in that kind of game. And on the contrary, I would say that the Americans feel more relaxed. They tend to assume this as a sport, as a competition, and for them it's a challenge to be in such a stadium and to play at such a height as Mexico City has, more than 2,200 meters height and so on. So there's a tension that in the last years has been very bad for Mexico, because for many decades, one of the advantages of soccer was that the United States remained an exotic country. They wouldn't be that active or that good, and Mexico could defeat the United States, and that had like a compensatory effect in Mexican self-esteem. Mm-hmm. So we were on a daily basis losing to American economy, but now and then we would win a game. That doesn't happen anymore. America has a great team. They are very good players. They are good athletes. And you see Mexican players with a lot of experience losing their nerves and playing very badly when they are so desperate to defeat the United States. But they are defeating themselves because they are too eager, too anxious to win.
What do you think of the Copa America this year with Mexico and the U.S. and Costa Rica being included? That's going to be huge.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting. And, well, Mexico seems to have an edge in these kinds of games because Mexico can play all over America as the home team. We have a large support crowd here. There are a lot of Mexicans living in the States, and they are more patriot than the Mexicans living in Mexico because out of nostalgia, they cherish a team that we Mexicans living inside the country sometimes were fed up of this team or fed up of the trainer, and we hate certain players. But here they have a more romantic relationship towards the national team. So that's going to play for. And this is going to be very, very interesting. But our black beast remains the United States. I mean, if we have to play against them, I don't know what's going to happen because it has more to do with nerves and sentiments and once again the mind of the players and not with the actual technical and athletical capabilities.
A lot of people in the U.S. Sort of fell in love with Miguel Herrera. And particularly, I don't know if you have access to the Men in Blazers podcast.
Yes.
They were just overwhelmed with Herrera. What do you think about Osorio?
Well, Herrera was on the verge of having a nervous breakdown and a heart attack in each play.
Yeah.
And He was so fantastic at enjoying and being desperate in the field, and he was very important in a difficult moment for the Mexican national team because our players, they lacked confidence, and here you had this instant leader who was taking them to the World Cup with another mentality. But he's not a shrewd trainer, and he lacks patience. And well, he was like a nervous wreckage when things went bad. So he was good as a cheerleader, but he was not a real trainer. And now we have Osorio, who is the opposite. He's a very serious man. He doesn't want to be in the limelight. He doesn't want to speak to the press. He doesn't do ads for commercial products. He's concentrated in his job. He knows very good the Mexican players because he used to work there before. And I think he's very, very good for us. But problem is, what is going to achieve Osorio in the long run? Because we have a terrible league in Mexico. The biggest business in our league is not to win the trophy. It is to sell and buy players, because there are commissions for everybody selling and buying players. So players, they change team very often. When a Mexican player retires, maybe he has been in 14 or 15 teams, which means, yes, that means that he has changed cities. He has proved different environments. His family, his children, they have to follow him. He has personal problems because of this. So we have a very unstable league. It's almost a miracle that when a team wins the tournament, that he wins it back to back. So we have a league that lasts just half a year, and then gives you the opportunity to sell and buy players. There's the draft after the league, and then players went from one team to the other, and the champion starts losing games. So how can you train a national team when the league is so unstable, when there is not a chance to make long-term plans, because the players, they are going to have a different playing standard, let's say in autumn, than the one they had in spring. So that's very difficult. So I don't know what's going to happen with Osorio on the long run because of the Mexican soccer system. But anyway, he's a very good trainer, and he has been done a very serious job so far.
That's interesting. I know about
you also have the MLS down there sniffing around trying to find the next player to bring in as a DP up here. So I mean, we're creating problems down there as well, I'm sure.
Well, yes, that's an international problem because, for example, you have players like the Argentinians. Almost none of them, they play for the national team in Argentina, inside Argentina. So this is the legion of foreigners who come back. And for example, the famous example of Messi, he has never played for a professional soccer team in Argentina. And it's difficult to deal with this. But I would say that most of the Argentinian or Brazilian players, they play in leagues that are stable. They may not play in the same country, but they play in Spain, in the Premier League in England, in the Serie A in Italy. And so they have an achievement during the whole year, and they stay in the same team for 2-3 years. So they are people who have, to which standard they can react. On the opposite, Mexican players, they play in a very different way at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year, and well, that's very, very, very tough for the trainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you too, sir. We'll probably start wrapping up and getting some of this down. But What if you were to put together a short list of soccer books about soccer that you think are like the world-class best ones, what are some of the titles that you'd include?
Well, there are a lot of books written, especially by Argentinian writers. I like very much Boquita, which is the biography of soccer team Boca Juniors, written by Martín Caparrós. Eduardo Galeano from Uruguay wrote a wonderful book, Fútbol a Sol y Sombra. No, this title has to do with the two sides of a stadium. No, the side of where the sun is hitting and the side with the shadow. Osvaldo Soriano, another Argentinian, wrote wonderful chroniques on soccer. There's one book by the Spanish author Manuel Vázquez Montalbán called Soccer, a Religion in Search of a God, which inspired me a lot since I wrote this, God is Round. Also the Brits, they have a very, very a good story of soccer here in America. Bill Buford wrote Among the Thugs, which is not actually about the game itself, but about the surroundings, and that interests me especially. It's a book about the hooligans. And Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby is a wonderful novel. There are also interesting fiction pieces on soccer. And, there's a large series of soccer books.
There really are. It's interesting to hear. Some of those I've read and some of those I have not. I don't even know if they've all been translated.
No, the book.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think the Bookeritos has it all. That's curious. Have you ever read B.S. Johnson's book? I think it's called The Unfortunates.
No, I don't know that book. I would like to read it.
It's in a box. Yeah, it's got all the pages are. It's all set up. All the chapters are their own little individual things, so you can essentially shuffle them and read in any order. But it takes place during a soccer game that he has to report on, and there's other things that go on. And it's just an element. Soccer is just an element, but it's an interesting kind of part to it. Are you doing other events for while you're here in the States after Penworld Voices?
Well, yes. I will be today, Friday, at the Irish House here in New York City with Glenn Patterson, an Irish writer that I met 20 years ago. And this is a soccer story as well, because I met him in Finland at a writers' gathering in June, and there was the midnight sun. So we played a game of soccer that started at 12 by night. But we had still sun, and it was a draw. The international writers team scored 4 goals against the Finns, who had, by the way, they had some semi-professional players in their team, and they also scored 4 goals. So the scorers, Glenn Patterson scored a goal, and I scored another one. We were forced to plunge into an almost frozen lagoon because they said the 4 scorers there have to go into the freezing water, otherwise you are going to lose the game. So we plunged there, and then there was the sauna. So it was like a rite of passage for writers who at one time of their lives wanted to be soccer players. So I'm looking forward to meet Glenn Patterson tonight, 20 years after that game.
And you guys are not going to plunge into a lagoon this time?
No.
Do you still play at all?
No, not just in my mind and in my dreams.
Yeah.
In my dreams, I score against Maradona's Argentina.
Oh, great. Well, it's been great talking to you. I think it's a really interesting book, and I think anyone who likes soccer and likes international literature will really find this very appealing and very interesting to read. So.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Of course, yeah. Take care.
I look it up to make it. When me a look still stay down in that's in the father tribulation. 1,000 blessings, give me stability and guidance, for protection and deliverance against all evil temptation. 1,000 blessings.